Aviation activity forecasts are crucial to proper airport planning. They are included in master plans and are reviewed and approved by the FAA at a national level. The FAA's National Level Aviation Activity Forecast is called the TAF, T-A-F, which stands for Terminal Area Forecast. It is available for public access at the link provided in your presentation. Click on that link and sign in as a guest. And I'll actually do that for you here in the video. Click on the link, sign in as guest, and you can get read-only access, but I'd like for you to get into this system and become familiar with navigating it. You can check on airports that you're interested in. Go to Loc ID and click on an airport that you might be interested in, and you can get all kinds of data, historical data and projected data or forecast data about enplanements, airport operations, based aircraft and TRACON operations. You click on those links and it will give you information on prior years up to the last year of collected data. It'll give you the total number of whatever it is that you've selected, and then the years with asterisks on them are the forecasted years. So we're forecasting in 2016 total of 106 based aircraft. So that's just an example, but I'd like for you to get into this system, figure out some of the airports that you're familiar with, click through it and become familiar with that system if you would. Now that you can see the trend and forecast of data, now let's talk about the factors that influence aviation activity forecasts. There are many factors to take into account when forecasting. Economic characteristics include local, regional, and national economic activity, as well as local businesses, manufacturing, etc. Demographic characteristics take into account disposable income, leisure time, and recreational activity. These things tend to generate more air travel and more GA activity, more general aviation activity. Geographic attributes, such as the distance between populations and centers of commerce, impact aviation activity. Aviation-related factors, what that refers to is the airline industry trends themselves, such as mergers, bankruptcies, and the introduction of low-cost airlines into the mix. And finally, other factors are those factors outside of the control of the industry, such as fuel prices, the price of oil, taxes, and politics. Those things are difficult to control, but they have great impact on the aviation landscape. So now that we've addressed trends, where to find the documented trends, and we've also addressed factors in forecasting, now let's look at some of the more common forecasting techniques. This information is taken both from your text and from FAA Advisory Circular 150/5070-6B. That advisory circular is in your course resources section, and you should be familiar with it by now. But this part of the presentation, or this part of the video, will mesh both your text and that advisory circular together. So now, talking about factors in forecast, or some of the common forecasting techniques, let's start with regression analysis. Regression analysis is a statistical technique that uses independent variables in comparison with dependent variables to tie aviation demand, the dependent variable, with various different independents. For example, let's say you wanted to know how disposable income over the years has impacted the activity at your airport. You could trend yearly disposable income per capita, which is a publicly available statistic, and that would serve as your independent variable. You compare that historical analysis with activity, say enplanements, and determine how, if at all, the independent variable, the economy, impacts the dependent variable, the aviation activity. It's a complex and expensive process, but it can be quite accurate. Trend analysis is another common forecasting technique. It's also called extrapolation. It's very common, in fact. It takes a historical pattern of activity and projects that trend into the future. You will see that displayed when you go into the FAA's terminal area forecast. You see the last few years worth of activity. In fact, we saw that when we went into that last database. We see the last few years worth of actual activity, and then with the asterisks, the trends from there. Sometimes those trends were ambitious, sometimes conservative, but this technique for forecasting is quite popular. It can be accurate, though. This is one of the limiting factors. It can be accurate so long as you have a good history of reliable data, number one, and number two, that no changes are anticipated. Another common forecasting technique is market share analysis or ratio analysis. Now, this technique assumes you will maintain the same or similar market share in the future as that you currently hold. Whatever percentage of the market share of all the aviation activity that you currently hold, it assumes you will maintain that. So as all aviation activity increases or decreases, your market share will remain the same and increase or decrease as such. So whatever percentage of the traffic from the national or regional level that you currently have, market share analysis assumes you will maintain that share as the national or regional market grows or recedes in future years. Smoothing is a point I wanted to bring out here. Smoothing is a technique that can be used in several of the different forecasting techniques. It's much like trend analysis or extrapolation. The only difference, and note this, the difference with smoothing is that with smoothing, greater weight is given to the latest trends. So if the latest trend, if it's been a fairly flat trend and the latest trend is an increase, smoothing will assume it's going to continue on the upswing, and vice versa for a downswing. So how do you select a forecasting method? Determine what you want to know, what information you have, and how much money or time you have to invest. Now, the FAA will review and approve the forecast. The forecast that you provide in the master plan has to be supported by acceptable forecasting analysis and consistent with the TAF. What does consistent with the TAF mean? It has to be consistent with the TAF. What's that mean? Well, I'm glad you asked, because it says it in the advisory circular. Here's the criteria from AC 150/5070-6P. And this is the criteria stating what is considered consistent with the FAA's TAF. Be familiar with this, please, as you get deeper into it. So all of that to get to this. What are aviation forecasts good for? Well, they're good for a lot. We already discussed the need for long-term planning and capacity needs. Airport infrastructure, runways, terminal buildings, parking aprons, all of that takes a lot of money and a lot of time to build. So the need must be anticipated well in advance of the actual need. Otherwise, incredible congestion can occur. In other areas, forecasting also helps with short-term needs, including personnel and peak operations planning. But the crucial thing is to anticipate the need in advance of the actual need so that we don't overbuild and waste money, and we don't underbuild and become congested.